following program brought to you in part by Hemp Shield and CanIHelpYou.care.
This is the cultivation panel, and we've got there's a missing person here, but we're also missing Kyle Cushman. I'm Chris Conrad. I'm the author of Hemp, A Lifeline in the Future, and The Newbie's Guide to Cannabis in the Industry, amongst other things. I worked as a marijuana expert witness in the courts, and I invite you all to come see the leafonline.com news website and to talk to me about cannabism and cannabis for people who want to use cannabis for spiritual as well as just for social or medical reasons. Anyway, I have the pleasure of getting to be your host today for the panel on cultivation. And so we've got 4 panelists. Like I say, Kyle Cushman, the creator of Veganics, is not here today, so we're going to have to carry on without him. You're going to miss that part of it. He's trying to work out a new book deal. But at the meantime, what we do have here, we have Tyson Haworth, who is with the... I actually need to put on my glasses. I lost my glasses, so I'm not going to put them on. Yeah, you're going to be this age someday too, so don't make fun of me. Who's with Oregon's Finest and So Fresh Farming and works with regenerative cannabis. Jade Stefano is Washington Sun Growers Industrial Association and Puffin Farms. We've got Stinkbud, whose latest book is called... Oh, thank you. Oh, there my glasses are. Okay. And thanks for everyone who pointed at my glasses and said I am as stupid as I look. No. And so then we have Stinkbud, whose book is Harvest 8 pound every 3 weeks. And he's also a stringer with Hightimes Magazine. And then Farmer Tom, who's a longtime supporter of organic farming and has done a lot of work with extraction and so forth that will be interesting to hear what you have to say there. And so let's see, just to mix things up, why don't we kind of start in the middle there, and we'll ask Tyson Haworth here to get us started on this. Now, the situation of cannabis growing has kind of, I would say it's split into 2 camps, but there's actually, I would say there are 3 camps. There's the people who really want to go organic, there's people who want to go higher tech, and then there's the indoor versus the outdoor kind of a discussion here. And they all have their relative merits. So why don't you go in and, Tyson, why don't you start us talking about where you fall on this spectrum of beliefs and what advice you would give to people who want to grow either commercially or personally, because I don't think that we have a breakdown on the topic here for that level. So something that might be important for a commercial grower versus a personal grower.
Thank you. Yeah, actually I started growing conventionally in a basement probably 15 plus years ago, and it was the generally accepted practice that you would just go down, ask the local garden shop owner how to cultivate, and then you plant your plants. And as we learned that cultivating indoor, there's a lot of benefits to it, but eventually we chose that growing with the sun actually had a better cannabinoid profile, better terpene profile. We felt like we would like to grow in full stem, but where we live in northern Oregon, it's not really possible to grow outdoor all year round. We get a lot of mold, a lot of early rain, similar to what you guys have up here in Washington. And so where we fell is on light depth, light assist greenhouses. And so we can grow with just the sun in the summertime, but then as we move forward, we use the lights and the various different other environmental controls that affords us in the wintertime to create a higher quality, more consistent crop.
Now, when you talk about growing a pound every 3 weeks, harvesting a pound every 3 weeks, that doesn't sound like outdoor, if I'm reading that correctly. You want to talk a little bit about the latest innovations of indoor growing?
Yeah, for indoor growing, although I actually believe in an organic approach, if you have the capabilities of being able to do that, there's a lot of people that if you live in an apartment or if you live in a small house or something like that, you don't have the opportunity to be able to grow outdoors, or you don't have the security or some. I mean, obviously in Oregon and Washington we have different laws, but you don't have to go very far where it's illegal to grow. So growing indoors makes the most amount of sense. Some of the things that I used to have to worry about when I was growing indoors before it was legal was just even carrying soil in and out, buying soil, going into hydroponic stores. The police used to monitor people and check their license plates. And go and give you these walk and knocks and stuff. And so there are some advantages for security reasons, and obviously here in Washington, Oregon, it's not such a concern. So also dealing with soil can be kind of hard. There's issues with pests and that sort of thing. It's a little bit more advanced. Do you think that that it'd be really simple to just put a couple seeds in soil, but it's not always that case. There's some methods that, like I teach, which is an aeroponic method. I've been using a lot of cocoa perlite mixes, and that seems to be like the kind of the hot thing for hydroponics right now. You can grow pretty much organic with organic nutrients. It's not as full as like growing in soil, but gives you a lot of the benefits of soil, and you get the growth rates of hydroponics that you just can't get anywhere else. But if I had to make an opinion, if you have a choice, then and you do have the space, and you can, you don't mind huffing the soil in 50-pound bags and stuff, it's really hard to beat organically grown natural soil with beneficial bacteria, and using quality or organic mixes. And you don't really, instead of feeding the plants, feed the soil and then let the soil feed the plants. And so that's kind of, to me, I believe the best way. If you can't, then cocoa would be my second choice. So
thanks for all that. And just a quick comment, if you could, here, Stinkbud. Now, one of the things that I've noticed about growing hydro versus growing soil is, of course, that your pH can go wildly aberrant with hydro. That seems like it's more stable in the general soil. Is there something you would suggest people do to maintain their systems in order to do that, or is it just a matter of check your pH?
So if you're growing with cocoa and you're doing like a drain to waste, you can actually adjust your pH to exactly what you want. So you can set it to 5.8, and then you can like check it with your pH meter. So it's really simple with hydroponic methods to be able to get the exact pH. Soil is where it gets hard. Trying to get your soil to the exact right pH, knowing how to even test it, and how to, there's a lot of different methods to even be able to get the correct pH. But if you're using drain to waste, if you're using a reoccurring system like an NFT type system or a aeroponic type system, then the nutrients you're going to change every 2 weeks anyway. So you can monitor your pH and add pH up and pH down, and it's actually really easy to keep your pH in check with a hydroponic system. That's one of the simpler things to do.
Yeah, because I once you get with the soil, you're dealing with that humic acid and stuff to try to balance it out. I've heard people like using vinegar and stuff in their grows and stuff. So we'll be here more about that. So let's go to Jade now with the Washington Sun Growers Industries Association and the Puffin Farms. Now, you're a sun grower, obviously. So maybe one of the things you might mention for us is when you talk about, give us some information, is what about what's going on like in California where we have all this smoke? Is that going to be hurting people's outdoor crops?
Well, yeah, I mean, smoke is a big problem. Our farm is here in Washington, so I can't speak directly to the California situation, but our friends' farms in Washington, I mean, it's smoky around the farms. So far, no one's under threat this year, but, it could happen. Tomorrow someone's farm could be burning down, so, that's not nice, yeah.
So go ahead and tell me more about your project, please.
Yeah, so it's from home grows to acres, right? So I've been growing for 23 years, started in a closet in a college campus in Oregon, we'll say, and then we just kept growing, and we've been growing for years. And so when 502 passed 5 years ago, we got licensed, and at that point we were not going to grow indoors anymore. Growing indoors sucks in a lot of ways. The pests love it, mildew, mold, spider mites, you name it. It's hard to keep stuff clean indoors because there's no natural competition from the environment. Outdoors, we've got predators, we've got ladybugs, we've got all kinds of stuff, weeds and all. We've got a very diverse biological system out there. We've got living soil. We're building carbon in our soil. Every year our soil goes up 1% or 2% in organic matter, and that is fighting global warming. And so the plant grows amazing in the sun. It's an herb. It's a plant. It wants to grow in the sun. Growing indoors is crazy as far as I'm concerned, except there are situations like Stinkbud mentioned, like some in New York City, or if you're a medical patient, you need to grow medicine and you don't have the luxury of growing outdoors, you live in a wet environment, whatever, that's fine. But to do it at an industrial scale in warehouses is total insanity, and it's a remnant of prohibition, and we just don't believe in it. And so the sun is where it's at. It grows the best weed. You get the best phytoconstituent profiles, the cannabinoid profiles, the terpene profiles. It's all better. You're giving back to the planet, and it's the way to go.
And I especially like your point about the organic matter in the soil actually sequestering carbon, because for people who don't understand that, well, organic matter refers to carbon-based material, and so the more it's in the soil, the less it's in the air and every place else. So that's a huge factor of growing organic, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And indoor factory farming, it's really, it's people who, the fertilizer companies are behind it. Let's put it that way. So Scott's Miracle-Gro, they now sell fertilizer to indoor factory farms. Does my organic farm need Scott's Miracle-Gro fertilizers? No way. We use organic, natural, whole amendments, compost and guanos and stuff that is like, whole products, real food, and, the 3-part nutrients that they want to pump in. They're going to be selling thousands of gallons of this stuff to these indoor factory farms. And so there's definitely some behind the scenes action to keep outdoor farms from succeeding and to keep it from being legal in many places. Lots of places are banning outdoor farming and forcing it into factories that are going to be spewing carbon into the atmosphere, increasing global warming and growing an inferior product.
And then you've got the fact Scott Miracle-Gro being bought by Monsanto, being bought by Bayer, where that's all going to take us.
It's insane.
And speaking on the organic area, this is one of Tom's big areas here, organic farming. So I wanted to get into that with you a little bit, to have you talk about it. And I'm going to pose two things to you quickly. One of them is that one of the things I find in California is that people who are growing, they always say they're growing organically, number one. Everybody tells me they're growing organically. But then when I've gone into looking at their supply shed, I'll often find a systemic rose pesticide that's going to kill off the things, and we hear about Eagle 20 and so forth. So my question is twofold. First off, how do you avoid, if you're in a bad situation, how do you avoid making that jump to save your crop? And the second thing is, if people do use something that's not organic, is there a way that through the extraction process you're able to clean that up?
Not really, and I really want to kind of go back to the California situation that you brought up originally, and the way they're going down there. Up here in Washington, we've been a bunch of cowboys, and everybody was really super independent. And California, I really like how they're coming together in these different communities. Like way up in Arcata, they've got the Sun Growers Guild up there. They've got 200 farmers, and then Mendocino has a couple of other similar projects. And so it's going on all over California. It's how they all group together. They all live in these little microclimates, and they live in these terroirs like they talk about in the wine industry. And I think that's key for marketing your product. I think it's key to keeping the small farmer in there. It's going to be really tough, like weathering out. But if they can incorporate tourism with their little microclimates and their microregions together, they're going to be able to succeed. Independently, they're probably going to fail miserably. We have all these mega farms popping up around California, and it's really harming the industry. Like 2 months ago, prices were $1,150, $1,200. A mega farm did their first drop, and the price went down to $600. And this is one mega farm. There's a dozen of them out there. Everybody's got one. I could name drop a bunch of celebrity mega farms, and it's just going to, like it did in Washington, Oregon, it's going to drive the price down, and then the small farmer's not going to be able to compete there. So that's where I'm really giving props to the groups in California that are banding together and not just trying to be the lone star by themselves. I think it's a better model, and I think it's more sustainable in the long run.
Well, thanks for that. Another point that brings up, though, is that we're having where people can name they control the regional name for their cannabis and so forth. All the time spacing out of the appellations. There we go. Not appellations, appellations with an E, which means that the name refers to where it's from, like Champagne came from Champagne, France, and so forth. So one of the things I'm wondering about, though, Tom, is I see a lot of people coming in, they drop their earth bags, 200-gallon earth bag, they fill it up with dirt that's imported from someplace else. Could they really be an appellation, or does it have to be in the soil, or is it the microclimate that makes that appellation valid?
I think the Appalachian Valley, growing there, is probably definitely the microclimates in the area and not so much trucked in soil. I think you got to make your beds, or we use the same soil, or we reuse the same soil every year. I come from a landscape background. I started landscaping in San Diego at 12 years old, and basically all we did was we got compost and the dirt, and we mixed it together, and we put some amendments in it, and that's how I grew for years. I mean, some of my best crops were that simple, The first two things when you go into any kind of growing situation is you test your soil and you test your water. so many people miss out on these things. They get these big, huge grows, and they go and they don't bother to test the water of the soil, and then they wonder why their plants are doing so horribly. So, I mean, do the research, start off, and then build your soil. I love being on this panel. They're all about the same thing I am, sun-grown, greenhouse grow. You can continue to grow all year. I think it's best in the ground because, it's grounded, and Mother Nature loves being in the ground, and my plants in the ground always do better than my plants that are in pots.
All right, and so then I wanted to go to you on this because you have regenerative cultivation as one of the things that you talk about. Well, you're not talking about regenerating a marijuana plant from after harvest, right? You're talking about regenerating the soil.
No, I'm talking about similar to what the other panelists are talking about here, and it's about sequestering carbon, not just not using pesticides, but actually being, a part of your local community and a part of the local environment, and sourcing locally found nutrients. It's about not using those 200-gallon bags with imported soil and imported fertilizers. It's about understanding what your local environment is, and then trying to augment that to bring out the best quality in your local environment. But I will say that most people do grow in a container or in a raised bed with no contact with the native soil, and so I would argue that at that point the appellation or the terroir doesn't really hold up. I think it's only when you do have the combination of your native soil and your native environment that you can really bring out those unique characteristics.
Yeah, I kind of felt like that too, but it's kind of interesting because I know so many people just bring in the bags and the dirt, and I love that, but I also wonder about it.
It makes sense in a basement, but not on an industrial scale.
And let's get to the basements here all of a sudden. I want to get back to Stinkbud here because, one of the things that I want to go back to what Farmer Tom said is I made that mistake of thinking, well, I'm not going commercially. I don't need really to test stuff. I'll just trust to luck. I don't have that kind of luck. I can't speak for other people, but whenever I say I'm going to trust to luck, I usually lose out. So that's a really good tip now. But let's get to Stinkbud here because a lot of people here talking about the environmental aspects of cultivation, and home growing is really, if it's grown indoor, in California, if you have an apartment, you just can't grow outdoors. You're going to be stuck with a tent indoors. And so then how do you balance this energy efficiency, particularly that carbon footprint with the indoor grow? Where are we in the LED lights, and at what point do you want to flip on a high intensity discharge light, and how are the compact fluorescents fitting into this? Can you kind of explain to people about the energy aspect of getting a good crop, maximizing yield, but not poisoning the environment with
I think it's still. LEDs are getting real close. We've. I believe Tyson is. We've tried a number of them, and they're not quite there yet. They're so close. It's getting close. But they are a good option if you are in an indoor grow environment. There's a big issue, probably your biggest issue if you're trying to grow in an apartment. Let's say you're a medical grower, you just want to get some medicine for yourself or for your wife or for someone that you care for, or you're taking care of patients. It's still hard to beat an HPS light, just for what you get. It's a high pressure sodium in a simple 4x4 tent with a simple 1,000 watt. If just to be able to get your own medicine, be able to take care of yourself and take care of pretty much all your friends is pretty realistic. The big issue is with heat. If you're in an apartment building, 1,000 watt puts out an enormous amount of heat. And so a lot of people are going to LED systems because they are cooler, and they're getting pretty close. You can grow enough to be able to get medicine for yourself. It's not necessarily commercially viable at this time, and growing with lights it's not really commercially viable. It's hard with the market nowadays to be able to make enough profit and pay for the power that you have to. That's why greenhouses and outdoors just make so much more sense from a commercial standpoint. But if you're just trying to get your own medicine and you're paying retail prices and stuff, it's not unreasonable to get just a small LED light, and be able to grow enough medicine for yourself. And I also really recommend, just for the veg stage, just the high output fluorescent lights. That's what I use for my veg. And you can just get a small little something that'll fit in a closet, and you can have your veg stage in a closet, and then you can have a small 4x4 tent in your spare bedroom or even next to your bed or something like that, and you should be able to grow all the medicine that you need. You don't even have to go out and buy it. In Oregon, anybody can grow 4 plants legally per property, so there's really no reason for anybody to be out necessarily buying commercial if they have a 4x4 space in their house. Everybody can grow. And if you want to go the full organic route with living soil and everything, you can do that indoors. You can inoculate the soil that you have with mycorrhiza, and you can buy soil that it's already inoculated and kind of get it. It's never going to be quite the same as growing outdoors where you have a living soil year after year, and it just gets better and better. But you can still get enough medicine to be able to take care of yourself. And I've known lots of people that have used like my system, and they've been able to take care of cancer patients and people that are going through a lot of pain and suffering, from seizures or from whatever it happens to be. So there's not that I don't want to take away from the commercial viability and the importance of that we have a commercial market, but I definitely believe that people should grow their own weed for their own personal use. You can grow better weed yourself than you can buy out in the market right now. Unless you're spending a lot of money for top shelf, you can grow better weed yourself. So.
And so, just one other thing, people growing indoors, what about the odor? Do you need a CO2 carbon filter? Excuse me, not CO2. You know what I mean? A carbon filter.
Yeah. So a lot of people they'll augment CO2 with bottles, or because the other option is to burn gas, which is too much heat. I've ran CO2 in my because your natural CO2 is, let's say, 400 ppm, but I would be able to run a CO2 bottle. But the thing is it's kind of a hassle because you have to go get it filled up, and that lasts a week or so, maybe 2 weeks. And it's kind of a pain in the ass for what you get. If you're just going for yourself medically, it's kind of hard to justify having to go deal with this tank, all the time. So I kind of recommend, if you have the option to be able to just to flush fresh air into your room as often as possible. You'll still get more medicine than you ever need. And if you're growing commercially indoors, then you kind of have to go CO2. And a lot of the big commercial growers run giant CO2 tanks and everything. I don't know. I almost feel sorry for the indoor grows that are doing that. It just seems like it's like worse than jail. You don't even have. I mean, even jail they have windows. When you're growing indoors, you don't even have windows. It just seems almost kind of sad. You know what I mean? Like I have my indoor grow that I have at my apartment, because I don't have any room, and they're just not as happy as the plants that are outdoors at the farm. The outdoors is just so much, it's just better.
Yeah, and just to clarify for people, I stumbled on my way there. I was talking about activated carbon filters, and I said CO2, which the CO2 actually boosts the growth. And so I conflated two things. I just want to make sure you understand they're different. And then I want to get back to Jade here. Now you're dealing with he was talking about the buildup of heat in the grow rooms and so forth indoors. Now, if people are growing in these tents with light depth, is that a similar problem that you have to deal with there? And then if it is, how do you handle that? And then the second thing I would say is, what about using CO2 inside of these greenhouses? I've heard of people doing that. Do you have any? How about you say? What do you think about that?
There are greenhouses that are basically an indoor environment with supplemental light, and that's a much better scenario than a full-on warehouse with no natural light, but it's still pretty close to indoor, and the carbon footprint could be 30-50% less at most, maybe 60 if they're using like fully controlled lighted greenhouses. And so but with a lot of light depping, people are pulling tarps, and at night the humidity builds up and you can get mildew issues, and so airflow is a huge issue. And so there's solutions like attaching fans to those, and so you can do a really low-tech light depth and still put in ventilation to keep airflow going and whatnot. And so we don't do a lot of that. We're field growers, so we grow with like tractors. We till the soil. We've got big hedgerows that are, we've got 3/4 of an acre right now of full season plants that were put in the ground, 6 to 18 inches tall when they went in. And so that's how we grow. So we're not doing too much with light dep anymore. We tried some light dep in our greenhouses for a couple of years, and it ended up being more hassle than it was worth. The plants do so well just in the field. In our particular terroir, we've got a really good spot where the season's just long enough. We've got dry conditions, but not too hot and dry. And so we've got a really nice spot by the river. We have river bottom sandy loam soil, so we grow in the natural soil and have just had to add compost and organic amendments to that to build a really great living soil. And so we don't do much light depth. So I think Tyson actually does a lot more of that than we do.
Okay, well, Tyson, why don't you talk about that a little bit? How do you handle those problems that come up when you try to do the light depth? But this was so you only do one harvest a year from your crop?
Yeah, that's correct. We do one harvest a year. It starts in the end of September, beginning of October, and we need to make October 15th is kind of like the day. If we can make it to October 15th, we can take down the whole field and be pretty happy. We've had to start harvesting in early October before end of September, and that's not as optimal, but it still works. And some strains can stay out in the field till November, and depending on the year, we had stuff out till December 1st once. And and that was like a Dutch treat strain that just like didn't want to get ripened, so we left it out, and it was okay. But so one big harvest. It's we chop down whole plants, hang them whole, upside down, full plant hang dry, and we got to get the plants out fast because they're it's the middle of October, the rains are coming, and
All right, great. And Tyson, so now the people I know who started doing the light dep were doing it because they didn't want to have their plants in the ground in August when the helicopters were going over. So they created a few different problems in the way they're doing it, but they also get 2 or 3 harvests a year. Does that result in lower harvests, like 2 smaller harvests versus 1 bigger harvest? Are you able to kind of get close to that? And how do you handle those problems that are created by doing the light dep system of trapping in things inside of the dome?
Yeah, well, we grew indoors up until about a year ago. We did that in addition to growing light depth greenhouse. In addition, we also grow full sun, long season outdoor. Our local environment in the north end of the Willamette Valley, it doesn't support the, October, Halloween harvest is what we shoot for. Try to pull our Durban poison out of the ground by them, but a lot of times we have to pull it early because of rains or storms, various different other challenges that we have. And so that's really where the light depth, light assist greenhouse comes in nice. It bridges both environments. It gives us the control as if we were indoors, but it also allows us to introduce the natural systems like living soil beds and the natural sunlight when it's available. We have a lot of problems with mold, and so we combat that in a few different ways. We have, like you said, fans, various different technologies that we'll put in place. We find that proper watering is probably the key to controlling mold. A lot of times when people are first starting out, it's just throw some more organic matter on there and you'll be a better organic farmer. But that doesn't always solve your issues, and so what we really rely on is microbiology testing. And so we'll actually go in there and we'll count the number of bacteria, the number of protozoa, nematodes, various different beneficial microbes and negative microbes. And what we find is typically our mold problems are due to a lack of proper drainage, especially when we're farming outdoor. Like if we don't subtil the soil appropriately, you'll get pockets. Especially we aren't blessed with sandy loam soil. We have a hard clay in the North Willamette Valley, and so there's a lot more amending that has to be done. We do a lot more testing for not just the microbiology, but also the chemistry in the soil, because when you have the proper chemical balance of your 17 macro and micronutrients, it makes it so that the soil will respond better, and then it won't make those plants so susceptible to pests and mold. And so really it's about taking the data and using that to your advantage when you're on a commercial scale.
All right, well, thanks for that. Now, we only have less than 10 minutes left, and we haven't really talked about seeds and genetics. I know the Phylos project is out there tracking genetics and so forth, and a lot of people are growing with clones anyway. Do you guys want to talk, but let's just work Jade all the way across this way because it's our last real chance to go through, about the seeds and the strains and so forth. What do you think is going to be happening next? Are we going to continue this hybridize, or are people going to go back to strains, or some corporations going to take over the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I mean, hybrids have completely taken over the market for the most part. Long season equatorial sativas are impossible to grow, outdoors at our level. I mean, you can light depth them, but some of them are so long that you don't get a good result. But that being said, there's a lot of interest in genetics. I mean, a lot of growers are trying really hard to preserve genetics and acquire genetics. We at this point as a commercial operation are dependent on clones that and the market demands consistency of product, and so we have the strains that work in our particular terroir, and we grow those every year. We try to do some seed tests yearly, but it's a whole nother project as like a commercial grower trying to survive in this market. Getting into genetics and seeds is just hard to even wrap your head around. But the genetic situation is kind of bad. We're losing a lot of genetics. I-502, you're not allowed to bring new genetics into the system except from 502. And so we're kind of limited legally by what's already in the state. And so it's a problem in Washington. I hope other states are more lenient with allowing genetics to come in, because there's huge genetic repositories all over the world, especially in Asia and India and Afghanistan and such, of weed that would grow really well, really old strains, and they're being lost, and we can't get them here in a legal manner, and so it sucks.
Okay, Tom, heritage strains and stuff like that, and any closing thoughts for the audience?
Yeah, the heritage strains are going to be tough to come around. We're seeing a lot more cloning going on and tissue culture, and they really stepped up their game in California. They've got, it's called, I've gone blank, but anyways, it's tissue culture on the next level, and they're able to produce 2,000 clones in a day. And at the same time, when they strip it all the way down, they're able to pull out any systemic issues like powdery mildew or any of the other issues that are in that plant. So I think the next stage is in cloning on a higher level to keep those strains. Your seeded plants, they do really well. They're way more vigorous. They're a healthier plant. And so it's going to be a toss-up. It's going to be the grower and what they have access to, and then who owns all these seed companies at the end of the day. My favorite topic is pest management. So I want to go on this. We use trap plants on our farm. So we usually plant our garden. So we have cannabis, and then we have a vegetable garden. So all the bugs usually go to the vegetable garden. So we make trap plants on the most delicious ones. So what we found out over the years, it's eggplant, because all eggplants are destroyed, the leaves, and then green beans are super good trap plants. So instead of using pesticides to keep them away, they go to the tastier food. So it's a great way. And then we use some neem products. There's some water-soluble neem products out there that are coming along, and they're going to get away from the oils and all of the soaps and stuff you have to use with it. And I think those are the problems that people are finding in the neem products these days, using in the neem products. But with some pest management light and good healthy outdoor plants in the sun, you generally don't have the problems.
All right. And so Tyson, let's take a second with the clones. I don't know how much you follow this, but when people use systemics in a clone, how far down to the line does that go? Because in California, people think that they use it at a very small stage, that they're going to pass it, and then they fail the test at the end.
Yeah, I've heard generations, but I'd love to chat to the genetics point for 1 second.
Yeah, please do. And anybody who, if you have a last a website or something you want to say, because we're really running out of time.
Yeah, we cherish the genes that we grow. I come from an organic produce wholesale background, and I know that many unique varieties of produce used to be grown all throughout the United States, but most of us consume one of a few varieties these days. If you're eating an apple or a strawberry or a raspberry, likely it came from Driscoll. And what Driscoll did is they figured out how to hybridize a lot faster than everybody else did, and so they were able to make super plants that would ship better and taste better and last longer. And so if you wanted to be a raspberry farmer, the only way to compete was to grow Driscoll's berry. And so we're likely headed down that same path, creating super cannabis. And what I really see as the antidote to that is the Open Genetic Project. And it's something that you mentioned, Phylos Bioscience, and something that we're believers in. We've had all of our strains genetically sequenced, and you can see it on our website. We're SoFresh.farm, and we list all of our cannabis strains. We list their genetic profile, and so you can actually pull up the galaxy and see where our strains fit relative to anybody else who's had them sequenced. And then we also list the terpene and cannabinoid profiles of every time we have it tested, so you can see that not just this name, but hey, just because we call it OG Kush doesn't mean 30 other people that grow it call it something different. And you can actually see what people are growing and what they're calling their strains. And so if you want to learn more about the plant and its terpenes, its cannabinoids, its whole entourage effect, and the impacts that how all of our different terroirs has on that, it's about understanding those phytoactive chemicals that are really what we want to create when we produce these flowers. And so I think that comes from organic, living soil under the sun is where you're going to get the most intense, best quality flower.
Stinkbud, you want to close it up with your thoughts and your website?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say one thing that I've noticed that's been happening with breeding and how the commercial has changed everything. And like, for example, like I'll be breeding strains and stuff, and one of the things that we have to do is do a test batch and find out if it tests up high enough. And I could have a strain that's really, really good medicinally, and it might be the best tasting strain and everything, but if it doesn't test above a certain percentage, none of the stores are going to want to buy it. And so it's getting kind of sad now is that THC, everybody gets hung up on the numbers of THC and everything. And what I'm seeing is a slight shift where people are starting to realize that terpenes are almost as big, if not a bigger deal than the THC. And people are getting less hung up on just the number. And they're starting to look at more what the terpene profiles are. And I'm hoping that this is going to have a little bit more beneficial to the medicinal sides of cannabis, because people can get, they're instead of just a numbers game, it can actually be, we can actually talk about the effects and how the THC and the terpenes, everything works together in the entourage effect and how that affects you. And people are educating themselves a lot more as far as genetics, not getting hung up just so much on numbers.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you brought up the terpenes here.
And then also, like Tyson was saying, if you go to www.sofresh.farm, you can see all the strains that we're running, and I post all the test results from every batch that we have on there. You can see the terpene profiles and the THC and CBD amounts and everything. And I think that's really helpful for people to be able to make educated decisions about their products and what they want to purchase.
Well, but they get 2 more minutes to wrap up here. And since you brought up the terpenes, I would like to have everybody, first off, give us your information for people to contact you and so forth. But second off, the terpenes, for people who don't know, are they create a lot of the fragrance of cannabis. And of course, the fragrance is what draws their neighbor, the cops, to your place. So people have mixed feelings. They love the terpenes, but at the same time, that may be their big problem. They draws them into trouble. And the other thing is, a lot of people, they have great terpenes, but then when they harvest and cure, terpenes disappear. So on the way out, maybe if you could talk to you about, getting the best cure or whatever, and tell them how to reach you for future reference.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can go to puffinfarm.com to get our contact information and come up and say hi to, I've got business cards if you want to contact me directly. But as far as the cure, the post-process, like after harvest, is the most important part of the whole thing to some extent. If you want to end up with a good product, you have to grow it well, but you can ruin good product so easily in drying and curing. And so I see these beautiful farms, they've got these gorgeous outdoor plants, and they don't have a drying space, and it gets ruined every year, and this just happens all the time, and it's pretty sad, but we've got that figured out. So when we built our farm, we built a 2,000 square feet of climate-controlled drying space with air conditioning. It's all metal walls, it's very clean, we have dehumidifiers, and so once the product's harvested, it goes right into these rooms that we try to keep below 70 degrees, and eventually we bring the temperature down even lower. But the key to high quality product is drying it slowly but not too slow, and then keeping it as cool as possible, and that prevents terpene loss. So the warmer you get, the faster the terpenes disperse. They're volatile organic chemicals that evaporate just like rubbing alcohol would. And so keeping the room cool, keeping it dry, and doing it slowly are the key to a good cure. And then once it's cured, sealing it up and keeping it in cold storage until you're ready to trim it. And on that note, waiting to trim product until it's going to go to market is also a really good tip. Every time you handle the bud and trim it, you lose terpenes. You're creating nicks in that you're removing material, and it's more surface area for those to evaporate out of. So just minimal handling of the product until it's going to be put in a package is really important.
Well, that makes me feel better about that bag I haven't gotten around to trimming yet. Farmer Tom.
So in the Pacific Northwest, we usually don't finish. Like my friend here, Tyson, was saying next door. We wait, and some of the telltale signs we're waiting for is the first limp bud. So when you first see a limp bud or a limp leaf on a bud, it's time to pull that whole plant. You've got some sort of botrytis going on. And as far as like harvesting and keeping the terpenes, the fresher the better. When you're looking for cannabis, the fresher the better. Like, it pays to go to the store and look at the harvest dates and all these type of things, because the fresher, like any other produce or like beer or microbrews or any of that stuff, fresh is best. So take your time, low and slow. We do, and on our small scale operation, we pull them into dark rooms for 3 days. We dry them initially to where they're snapping off. the stem is snapping off, the bud stem is snapping off, and if it snaps, it's dry enough, and if it doesn't snap, it's not dry enough. Then we put it in where we live because of our moisture situation. We put them into brown paper bags, and then that's gone on for about 5 days, and then we put them into some sort of a turkey bag or glass jars, and then we go through the burping process and keep it in a cool place. The key thing is like she said, don't trim until you're going to use it. A lot of these big operations, that's the way they're handling it. I see what's going on in California, and that's a big part of the operation there. You know, we make oil. Everything's flash frozen these days for a bubble hash and ice hash and everything, because every day, every minute, you're losing terpene profiles every day. So if you want to get the full spectrum, we did a lot of fresh frozen, different types of concentrates over the years, and they always have the best spectrum of terpenes. So that's my spin on terpenes.
Thanks, Tom. I completely agree. Low and slow. It's something where you have, anytime you're over 60% relative humidity, you're typically rehumidifying the plant. Anytime you're over 70 degrees, you're volatilizing all of those terpenes very quickly. But there's also other compounds in there that we aren't measuring for yet, like thiols, which are like responsible for your skunk smells. There's alcohol esters, which are believed to be responsible for your fuel smells. There's flavonoids, and all of these things are volatile and organic, and so when it's warm, they're dissipating. When you smell that, that's pharmacologically active. You know, there should be for free smells, right? It's actually having an impact on you. You know, and so every time you're taking that away, that's not going to be enjoyed when you want to enjoy the flower. And so just think about that. Keep the temperature low, and keep it low throughout the whole supply chain, because if it ever hits 80 degrees or 85 degrees, you're going to open up that jar, it's going to smell real good once, and then it's going to be gone. And so don't volatilize those terpenes, enjoy them. All right. You can reach me at sofresh.farm if you want to reach out to me directly. I'll be around here afterwards. Thanks.
Last word, Stinkbud.
Yeah, and just I think everybody summed it up pretty well. Just also something to remember too is the cannabinoids also will change over time. You know, we've all seen old weed that makes you kind of sleepy. You know, it's, you know, like if you had something set in the closet for a year or something like that. Not only do you lose all the terpenes and the smells and the flavors and everything, but it also some of the THC changes from basically just, instead of making you high, it makes you sleepy. So it may be good if you have insomnia, but it's not necessarily, trust me, it doesn't taste good. So.
All right. Well, with that, thank you to the panel here. Thank you everyone for your patience. The next panel is going to be on the veterans. So I'd like to thank Jade Stefano, Farmer Tom, Tyson Haworth, and Stinkbud here. Buy their books, go to the website.